The air in the boardroom hung thick with unspoken malice. I felt the sting of humiliation burn my cheeks as he refused to shake my outstretched hand, his eyes glinting with dismissive amusement. Every flicker of the fluorescent lights seemed to amplify the silent laughter of the executives surrounding the mahogany table, their faces masks of polite disdain. They thought they had won, that they had crushed me. But in that moment, as his rejection echoed in the cavernous room, a cold resolve settled deep within my bones. They had just signed their own dooms. If you cherish the bond with your father, subscribe now. I had dedicated 15 years of my life to building this company, pouring my heart and soul into every deal, every negotiation, every painstaking detail. My name is Tiffany, and until that moment, I believed I was a valued member of the team, a respected leader, a trusted confidant. I had weathered countless storms, navigated treacherous waters, and always delivered results, exceeding expectations time and time again. I'd even sacrificed personal milestones, missed family events, and endured sleepless nights, all for the sake of the company's success. I'd considered these people my friends, my colleagues, my extended family. We'd celebrated victories together, supported each other through setbacks, and forged bonds that I foolishly believed were unbreakable. I trusted them implicitly, shared my vulnerabilities, and confided in them my hopes and dreams. And yet, there I stood, exposed and vulnerable, the target of their collective scorn. The CEO, Robert, a man I had considered a mentor, a friend, a father figure even, looked at me with undisguised contempt. The deal we were about to close, the one that would secure the company's future and solidify its position as a market leader, was entirely my creation. I had painstakingly assembled every piece, navigated complex negotiations, and secured the necessary approvals. It was my masterpiece, the culmination of years of hard work and dedication. The tension in the room was so thick you could almost taste it. I felt sweat trickling down my back. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the soft hum of the air conditioning, each second an eternity. He was making a spectacle of me, a public display of power intended to humiliate and demoralize. He wanted to break me, to strip me of my confidence and reduce me to nothing. I could see it in his eyes, the gleam of satisfaction, the cruel enjoyment he derived from my discomfort. He believed he was untouchable, that his position and power shielded him from any consequences. He thought I would crumble under the pressure, that I would meekly accept his dismissal and fade into oblivion. But he was wrong, terribly wrong. Beneath the surface of my outward composure, a fire was ignited. A burning, all-consuming desire for retribution began to take root, and I knew, with unwavering certainty, that I would make them pay for their betrayal. I would dismantle their empire brick by brick, expose their hypocrisy, and watch as their carefully constructed world came crashing down around them. I would not rest until justice was served, until they had experienced the same humiliation and pain that they had inflicted upon me. The person I trusted most was one of them. Sarah, my closest confidant, the woman who had stood beside me through thick and thin, the one I had confided in about everything, was smirking, ever so slightly. It was almost imperceptible, a subtle tightening of the lips, a fleeting flicker in her eyes. But I saw it, and in that moment, the full weight of their betrayal crashed down upon me. It wasn't just Robert, it was her too. They had orchestrated this together, planned my downfall with cold, calculated precision. They had used my trust against me, manipulated my loyalty, and exploited my vulnerabilities. The realization was like a punch to the gut, leaving me gasping for air, struggling to comprehend the depth of their treachery. The crimson tide of anger threatened to consume me, but I fought it back, forcing myself to remain calm, to maintain a semblance of control, because I knew, in that moment, that my revenge would be all the sweeter if they never saw it coming. The days that followed were a blur of humiliation and frantic damage control. My office, once a sanctuary of creativity and strategic planning, now felt like a cage, the walls closing in with every passing hour. Robert had effectively sidelined me, stripping me of my responsibilities and assigning my projects to others, each action a calculated blow to my professional reputation. The whispers followed me like a shadow, the curious glances and hushed conversations a constant reminder of my diminished status. I tried to salvage the situation, to understand what had gone wrong, to reason with Robert, but my efforts were met with cold indifference and thinly veiled contempt. He refused to meet with me, his assistant delivering curt messages that offered no explanation or opportunity for reconciliation. I even attempted to speak with Sarah, to appeal to our years of friendship, but she avoided me, her eyes darting away whenever our paths crossed. It was as if I had become invisible, a ghost haunting the corridors of a company I had helped build. Sleepless nights became the norm, the weight of injustice pressing down on me, fueling a gnawing anxiety that refused to dissipate. I replayed the events leading up to the boardroom debacle, searching for clues, for some indication of their betrayal, but I found nothing. They had been masters of deception, concealing their true intentions behind a facade of loyalty and friendship. The shattering of trust was profound, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew about the people I worked with, the relationships I had forged, and the very foundation of my professional identity. The stress took a physical toll. My appetite vanished, replaced by a constant nausea. Dark circles formed under my eyes, a testament to the countless hours spent tossing and turning, consumed by anger and a desperate need for answers. I was a shell of my former self, my confidence eroded, my spirit broken. I felt utterly alone, isolated in a sea of corporate sharks, surrounded by people who had once been my allies, now my enemies. Desperate, I sought solace in the few remaining relationships I still trusted, my father and my younger sister. I confided in them the details of my situation, the betrayal, the humiliation, the crushing weight of injustice. My father, a man of unwavering integrity and fierce loyalty, listened patiently, his eyes filled with concern. He offered words of encouragement, reminding me of my strength, my resilience, and my unwavering commitment to justice. He urged me not to give up, to fight back against those who had wronged me, but to do so with integrity and grace. My sister, ever the pragmatist, offered a different perspective. She encouraged me to document everything, to gather evidence of their wrongdoing, to prepare for a legal battle if necessary. She reminded me that I had rights, that I deserved to be treated with respect, and that I should not allow them to get away with their treachery. Their support was a lifeline, a reminder that I was not alone, that I had people who believed in me, who would stand by me through thick and thin. Emboldened by their encouragement, I began to meticulously document every interaction, every email, every meeting, gathering evidence of Robert and Sarah's scheme to undermine me. I knew it was a long shot, but I was determined to fight back, to expose their lies, and to reclaim my reputation. I started to notice inconsistencies in the company's financial records, subtle discrepancies that suggested something was amiss. I dug deeper, spending countless hours poring over spreadsheets, scrutinizing invoices, and tracing transactions. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered, a tangled web of deceit and corruption that implicated Robert and Sarah in a series of illegal activities. They had been siphoning company funds, inflating expenses, and engaging in insider trading, all while using me as a scapegoat to shield themselves from scrutiny. The revelation was both shocking and infuriating, confirming my suspicions that their betrayal was not merely a personal vendetta, but a calculated attempt to conceal their criminal behavior. My vision blurred as the glass in my hand shattered from the pressure. The crimson drops mingled with my tears. That was the turning point. The moment I knew I would not rest until they faced the consequences of their actions. The feeling of isolation was crushing, a suffocating weight that threatened to drag me under. I started having nightmares, vivid replays of the boardroom scene. Robert's sneering face, Sarah's subtle smirk, the collective judgment of my colleagues. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the memory of their betrayal searing my mind. I stopped eating, lost weight, and became increasingly withdrawn, isolating myself from the outside world. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, the walls closing in, amplifying my sense of despair. I spent hours staring out the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, feeling utterly disconnected, like an alien observing a world I no longer belonged to. The thought of facing another day at the office filled me with dread, the prospect of enduring more humiliation and contempt unbearable. I considered resigning, walking away from everything I had worked so hard to achieve, but the thought of letting them win, of allowing them to drive me out, fueled a flicker of defiance within me. I couldn't let them break me. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me defeated. I had to fight back, to expose their lies, and to reclaim my life, even if it was the last thing I did. The day I found the evidence, the concrete proof of their illegal activities, was also the day I almost broke. I had been working late, as usual, sifting through mountains of financial documents, searching for any shred of evidence that would corroborate my suspicions. I felt numb, exhausted, my mind reeling from the sheer volume of data I had been processing. I was on the verge of giving up, convinced that I was chasing a ghost, that I would never find the smoking gun that would bring them down. But then, as I was about to close my laptop, something caught my eye. A seemingly innocuous transaction, a small transfer of funds from a company account to an offshore bank. I clicked on the transaction, and a window popped up, revealing a series of related transactions, all linked to shell corporations and offshore accounts. I traced the flow of funds, and the picture began to emerge, a complex web of deceit and corruption that implicated Robert and Sarah in a massive fraud scheme. They had been systematically siphoning company funds, inflating expenses, and engaging in insider trading, all while using me as a scapegoat to shield themselves from scrutiny. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, confirming my worst fears and solidifying my resolve to bring them to justice. But as I sat there, staring at the evidence on my screen, the weight of what I had uncovered threatened to overwhelm me. The implications were staggering, the potential consequences dire. I knew that exposing them would not only destroy their careers, but could also lead to criminal charges and imprisonment. And I knew that they would stop at nothing to protect themselves, that they would use every resource at their disposal to silence me. The fear was paralyzing, the temptation to bury the evidence and walk away overwhelming. I could pretend I never saw anything, resume my life, and try to forget what had happened. But I knew I couldn't. I couldn't live with the knowledge that they were getting away with their crimes, that they were continuing to exploit and deceive others. I had a moral obligation to speak out, to expose their lies, and to hold them accountable for their actions. That night, I went home and stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. I barely recognized the hollow-eyed woman staring back. Had they won? Had they taken everything? A tear traced a path down my cheek. But then I saw something else in my reflection, a flicker of defiance, a spark of the woman I used to be, the woman who wouldn't back down, the woman who fought for what was right. It was faint, but it was there, and it was enough. The fear didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled me. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them steal my life. I would expose them, and I would make them pay. I spent the rest of the night meticulously copying all the evidence onto a secure hard drive, encrypting it with multiple layers of security, and storing it in a safe place. I knew that I was taking a huge risk, but I was prepared to face the consequences. I had nothing left to lose. From that moment on, I was no longer a victim. I was a planner. The hunted became the hunter. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every email, every meeting, building an arsenal of evidence that would expose their lies and bring them down. I started to observe them more closely, studying their habits, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. I realized that their biggest weakness was their arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable. They had become complacent, careless, confident that they could get away with anything, and that was their undoing. I smiled. It was a small, tight smile, but it was genuine. The game had changed, and I was about to play it by my rules. The thought of their downfall, of the moment their carefully constructed world came crashing down around them, fueled a sense of grim satisfaction within me. I would make them pay for their betrayal. I would dismantle their empire brick by brick, and I would watch as they faced the consequences of their actions. Justice was coming, and it would be served cold, very cold. I smiled. I played their game. I acted the part of the broken, defeated employee, going through the motions, pretending to accept my diminished role. But beneath the surface, a meticulous plan was taking shape. I started arriving earlier and staying later, ostensibly to catch up on the work that had been piling up. But in reality, I was gathering intelligence. I needed to understand their routines, their communication patterns, their security protocols. I learned that Robert always arrived at 7:30 a.m., used the same parking spot, and spent the first hour of his day reviewing financial reports. Sarah, on the other hand, was more unpredictable, but she always made a point of visiting Robert's office first thing in the morning. Their communication was a mix of face-to-face meetings, encrypted emails, and coded phone calls, a clear indication that they were trying to conceal something. The security in the building was surprisingly lax, consisting of a few outdated surveillance cameras and a security guard who spent most of his time reading magazines. It was almost too easy. I knew that I needed to be careful, that one wrong move could expose my plan and jeopardize everything I had worked for. But I was also confident that I could outsmart them, that I could use their arrogance and complacency against them. My apartment became my war room. Spreadsheets covered my dining table, timelines mapped out on my living room wall, and sticky notes plastered on every available surface. I was obsessed, consumed by the details of my plan, determined to leave nothing to chance. I invested in a high-quality audio recorder, disguised as a pen, and started carrying it with me everywhere, discreetly recording conversations and meetings. I learned how to bypass their email encryption, gaining access to their private communications, and uncovering even more evidence of their illegal activities. I even consulted with a forensic accountant, a trusted friend from college, who helped me decipher the complex financial transactions and identify the key pieces of evidence that would be most damaging to them. The closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. I started noticing subtle signs that they were onto me, that they suspected something was amiss. Sarah began to avoid me altogether, and Robert started scrutinizing my work more closely, looking for any excuse to reprimand me. I knew that I was walking a tightrope, that I needed to be extra careful not to arouse their suspicions. One afternoon, while I was working late, I noticed Robert lurking outside my office, peering through the blinds. I quickly closed my laptop, pretending to be engrossed in a report, and waited for him to leave. It was a close call, a reminder that I was playing a dangerous game. But it also fueled my determination to bring them down, to expose their lies and reclaim my life. I started experiencing moments of intense paranoia, convinced that I was being watched, that my phone was being tapped, that my apartment was being bugged. I took extra precautions, varying my routes to work, using disposable cell phones, and sweeping my apartment for listening devices. I even installed a hidden camera in my office, disguised as a smoke detector, to monitor their movements and gather evidence of their wrongdoing. The camera captured several incriminating conversations between Robert and Sarah, discussing their plans to cover up their crimes and silence anyone who threatened to expose them. It was the smoking gun I had been looking for, the definitive proof that would seal their fate. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I knew that I was close to the end, that the moment of truth was rapidly approaching. I spent hours rehearsing my presentation, crafting a narrative that would expose their lies and sway the board of directors to my side. I knew that I needed to be prepared for anything, that they would likely try to discredit me, to attack my character, to twist the truth. But I was confident that I could overcome their defenses, that the evidence I had gathered was too overwhelming to ignore. I also contacted a lawyer, a seasoned litigator who specialized in corporate fraud cases. I explained my situation, showed him the evidence I had gathered, and asked him to represent me. He was impressed by the thoroughness of my investigation and agreed to take my case, advising me on the legal strategy and helping me prepare for the inevitable lawsuit. He warned me that it would be a long and arduous battle, but he assured me that I had a strong case and that I would ultimately prevail. With each passing day, the tension mounted, the stakes grew higher, and the risks became more acute. I knew that I was playing a dangerous game, that I was putting my career, my reputation, and my freedom on the line. But I was also driven by a deep sense of justice, a burning desire to expose their lies and hold them accountable for their actions. I would not rest until they had faced the consequences of their betrayal, until they had experienced the same humiliation and pain that they had inflicted upon me. The day they tried to end me was the day their nightmare began. The USB drive. It was sitting on Robert's desk, innocently nestled amongst a pile of financial reports. I knew, with a certainty that ran deeper than logic, that it contained everything. The master plan, the irrefutable proof, the key to their downfall. The problem, Robert never let it out of his sight. It was his digital lifeline, his insurance policy, the repository of all their dirty secrets. He carried it with him everywhere, a constant reminder of the power he wielded and the risks he faced. Getting my hands on it felt impossible, like trying to snatch the moon from the sky, but I had to try. I spent days observing him, studying his habits, searching for a weakness, an opportunity. I learned that he always took a lunch break at 1 p.m., leaving his office for precisely 45 minutes to grab a sandwich from the deli downstairs. During that time, his office was usually empty, the door locked, the USB drive sitting unguarded on his desk. It was a small window, a fleeting chance, but it was all I needed. The plan began to form in my mind, a delicate dance of deception and precision. I needed to create a diversion, something that would draw Robert away from his office long enough for me to slip in, grab the USB drive, copy its contents, and return it before he even knew it was gone. I decided to use Sarah's ambition against her. I knew that she craved Robert's position, that she was secretly plotting to undermine him and take his place. I also knew that she was fiercely competitive, always eager to prove her worth. So I crafted an email, a carefully worded message designed to appeal to her vanity and exploit her insecurities. Posing as an anonymous headhunter, I offered her a fictitious job opportunity at a rival company, a senior management position with a significantly higher salary and more responsibility. I made sure to mention that the offer was contingent on her submitting a detailed presentation outlining her accomplishments and her vision for the future. I knew that Sarah wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. She would jump at the chance to impress the headhunter and secure the new job, even if it meant betraying Robert in the process. The email worked like a charm. Within minutes of sending it, I received a reply from Sarah, expressing her interest in the position and requesting more information. I played along, engaging her in a series of email exchanges, feeding her carefully crafted details about the fictitious job and subtly encouraging her to prepare her presentation as soon as possible. I knew that she would want to impress the headhunter with her speed and efficiency, that she would be working late into the night to perfect her pitch, and that's exactly what I needed. The stage was set. The trap was laid. All that was left was to spring it. The following day, I waited for the opportune moment. At precisely 12:45 p.m., I sent Sarah an urgent email, informing her that the headhunter had requested an immediate meeting to review her presentation. I made sure to emphasize the importance of making a good impression, and subtly suggested that she might want to borrow some data from Robert's files to strengthen her pitch. I knew that Sarah wouldn't hesitate to cross that line. She was ruthless, ambitious, and willing to do whatever it took to get ahead. Within minutes, I saw her hurrying towards Robert's office, a determined look on her face. I watched as she knocked on his door, engaged him in a brief conversation, and then disappeared inside. This was it, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and headed towards Robert's office. The hallway was deserted, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the air conditioning. I reached his door, pressed my ear against the wood, and listened intently. I could hear Robert and Sarah arguing, their voices rising in anger. Perfect. They were distracted, their attention focused on each other. I carefully slid a lockpick into the door, gently manipulating the tumblers until I heard a soft click. The door was unlocked. I slipped inside, closing the door silently behind me. Robert's office was exactly as I expected, meticulously organized, impeccably clean, a reflection of his controlling personality. The USB drive was sitting on his desk, right where I had seen it countless times before. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for it, my fingers trembling with anticipation. But then I heard a noise, a cough, a rustling of papers. I froze, my hand hovering over the USB drive. Robert and Sarah were still in the office. They hadn't left. This wasn't part of the plan. Panic surged through me as I realized that I had walked into a trap. They knew. They had been expecting me. The email, the presentation, the argument, it was all a setup, a carefully orchestrated scheme to lure me into their clutches. I turned to run, but it was too late. The door swung open, and Robert and Sarah stepped inside, their faces contorted with malice. "Looking for something?" Robert sneered, his eyes glinting with triumph. Sarah smirked, her gaze cold and calculating. "We knew you were up to something," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You really thought you could outsmart us?" I was trapped, exposed, defeated. But even as fear gripped my heart, a flicker of defiance remained. They may have caught me, but they hadn't broken me. Not yet. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I would fight back, even if it was the last thing I did. "I know everything," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I know about the fraud, the embezzlement, the insider trading, and I have the evidence to prove it." Robert and Sarah exchanged a look of alarm. Their smiles faded, replaced by a mask of cold calculation.
"You have no idea what you're dealing with," Robert said, his voice low and menacing. "This is bigger than you can imagine. You need to let it go before you get hurt." "It's already too late for that," I replied, my eyes fixed on theirs. The evidence is out there. Even if you silence me, the truth will come out. Sarah stepped forward, her face inches from mine. You're playing a dangerous game, she whispered, her voice like ice, and you're about to lose. They moved closer, their faces closing in, their intentions clear. This was it, the end of the line. But then, just as they were about to strike, the lights went out. The office plunged into darkness. A scream pierced the silence. And then, nothing. The darkness was absolute, a thick blanket that muffled sound and distorted perception. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating silence. Then, a single beam of light sliced through the void, illuminating a figure standing in the doorway. It was Mark, the IT guy, a quiet, unassuming presence who usually blended into the background. But now he stood tall and resolute, a USB drive clutched in his hand. He had been the one sending me encrypted messages, the one who had warned me about Robert and Sarah's treachery. He had been my silent ally, my guardian angel. While Robert and Sarah were distracted creating their trap, Mark had been busy setting one of his own. The lights flickered back on, revealing the scene in all its stark reality. Robert and Sarah were slumped on the floor, disoriented and confused. Mark calmly walked over to the security camera, ripped out the memory card, and handed it to me. Everything they've done, every lie they've told, every crime they've committed, it's all on here, he said, his voice steady and unwavering. It's time to end this. He had been recording everything, documenting their every move, gathering the evidence I needed to expose them. He knew what they were capable of, and he wasn't going to let them get away with it. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. I met with my lawyer, presented him with the evidence, and filed a lawsuit against Robert, Sarah, and the company. The allegations were explosive: fraud, embezzlement, insider trading, conspiracy. The story quickly leaked to the press, and the company's stock price plummeted. Robert and Sarah were suspended pending an internal investigation. The board of directors was in an uproar, demanding answers and accountability. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. They had tried to ruin me, to silence me, to erase me from existence, but they had underestimated my resilience, my determination, and the power of justice. The day of the board meeting arrived. I walked into the room, head held high, the USB drive and the security camera footage in my possession. Robert and Sarah were already there, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes filled with fear. They knew that their time was up. My lawyer presented the evidence, meticulously laying out the case against them. The financial records, the emails, the recorded conversations, the security camera footage. It was all there, undeniable and irrefutable. Robert and Sarah tried to deny the allegations, to deflect blame, to twist the truth, but it was no use. The evidence was too overwhelming, the case too strong. One by one, the board members turned against them, their faces filled with disgust and disappointment. Robert's face crumbled as he realized that he had lost everything: his career, his reputation, his freedom, all gone in an instant. Sarah, always the pragmatist, tried to cut a deal, offering to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for immunity, but the board wasn't buying it. They had been betrayed, deceived, and manipulated. They wanted justice. The vote was unanimous. Robert and Sarah were fired, effective immediately. The company announced that it would be cooperating fully with the authorities and that it would be seeking to recover all the stolen funds. As Robert and Sarah were escorted out of the building, they turned to me, their eyes filled with hatred and resentment. "This isn't over," Robert snarled. "You'll pay for this." I simply smiled. "It is over," I said, my voice calm and resolute. "You lost." In the aftermath, the company was restructured, new leadership was brought in, and stricter ethical guidelines were implemented. The lawsuit was settled, and I received a substantial payout. I used the money to start my own company, a business built on integrity, transparency, and respect. Robert and Sarah faced criminal charges and were ultimately convicted of fraud, embezzlement, and insider trading. They were sentenced to several years in prison, their lives forever tainted by their greed and their corruption. They lost everything. I just smiled. They had tried to end me, but instead, they had ended themselves. They had underestimated the power of justice, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unwavering determination of someone who had been wronged. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's the price that some people have to pay for the pain they inflict on others. It's a reminder that actions have consequences, and that no one is above the law. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.